You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Samia Sayed. Welcome to another show. Joining us very shortly is Brother ASAD Choudhary, a member of the Islamic Schools Association of Canada, to tell us more about this new organization. But first, let's take a look at the headlines. National exhibit highlights human trafficking in Canada. Canadians aid Pakistan flood victims. GoFundMe set up for community leader Fauzia Mazhar. Moqtada Sadr calls on his supporters to end fighting in Baghdad. And now the details. An ongoing national exhibit on human trafficking organized by Public Safety Canada is highlighting the gravity of the situation across the country. The exhibit has made stops in Halifax, Montreal, Thunder Bay, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and most recently in Toronto. These cities reported some of the highest sex trafficking crimes between 2010 to 2020. The executive director of the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking says to a media source that the biggest problem is that people do not know what human trafficking looks like. Public Safety Canada defines human trafficking as a modern form of slavery. It is about controlling a person for the purposes of exploitation. Canada's federal government has announced funding of $5 million for humanitarian assistance to partner agencies on the ground to provide food and cash to the worst flood-affected areas in Pakistan. Multiple Canadian humanitarian and relief organizations have launched donation appeals to collect aid for those affected. Notable organizations include Human Concern International, ICNA Relief Canada, Islamic Relief Canada, and International Development and Relief Foundation. 33 million Pakistani people are affected by the unprecedented monsoon rains. This is close to the entire Canadian population. The deadly floods have flushed away houses, roads, and bridges. 1 million people have lost their homes, and the death toll is higher than 1,000. A GoFundMe campaign is collecting funds to provide treatment and rehabilitation care to Fauzia Mazhar, Executive Director of the Coalition of Muslim Women Kitchener-Waterloo. She will undergo spinal surgery following an injury in a desert safari ATV crash in Dubai, the organization says in a news release. She has previously survived breast cancer. Mazhar is a well-known community leader and an equity and peace advocate. She works to provide Muslim women with growth and leadership opportunities. Mazhar sits on several boards, including the Anti-Racism Working Group and the Grand River Hospital in the Waterloo region. Iraqi supporters of powerful cleric Moqtada Sadr began withdrawing today from Baghdad's Green Zone after he demanded fighting end between rival Shia forces and the army. The clashes between the two parties have left 23 dead and hundreds wounded. The violence that erupted on Monday saw Sadr loyalists and Shia factions backed by neighboring Iran engage in gunfire across barricades. The United Nations has warned this violence risks tipping the war-ravaged country deeper into chaos. Moments after Sadr's speech was broadcast live on television, his supporters were seen leaving the Green Zone. Minutes later, the army lifted a nationwide curfew. That's it for the news. Islamic schools in Canada have been around for quite some time now, but they are missing something big and quite fundamental: collaboration between these schools, specifically having a body that draws together members from these schools to pool together their knowledge and create new content and resources for teachers to use when training that next generation. Now, the Islamic Schools Association of Canada is attempting to do just that. Joining us now is Brother ASAD Choudhary, the co-founder of ISAC, or the Islamic Schools Association of Canada, to tell us more about the new initiative. Welcome, Brother ASAD, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Samia, for having me.
Brother ASAD, tell me a little bit about the association. How did it all start?
Well, the Islamic Schools Association of Canada started really with a select few individuals, educators, and researchers here based in Canada that truly appreciated the need of collaboration and networking among our Islamic schools. More recently, we've seen an increase in the number of Islamic schools. And it's almost like wherever you go in Canada, alhamdulillah, there's a school that's landed in your city or close to it. So with this growing trend and the continuing trend of evolving space in Islamic schools, truly there was a need that was identified, and that's really how the association came about.
Mm-hmm. Is the purpose of the association then, as you said, just networking?
That's where it starts. So, I mean, step one is to kind of, allow people to get to know one another, look at what other schools are doing in comparison to what you're doing, and truly having that network that you have at your fingertips. So that's where it all starts. But we are hoping that it leads into a lot more than that. Things including like having better access to resources that may not be accessible right now, whether that is through discounts of purchases, through bulk, understanding and kind of exploring what different schools are using for specific subject areas or learning modules or even learning abilities in their schools, and tapping into what the other schools have that one school may not have had, as well as best practices, sharing and seeing and experiencing best practices, and being able to also spread that across schools as opposed to just within a building.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll get more into the resources later on in the interview, but I want to ask, from what it sounds like, the association is a networking group to build resources, but there are also a lot of groups that are much like the association, but just smaller. How is the association different then?
I think it's just that the fact that the evolving of Islamic schools is not just simply happening in one area of the country. Islamic schools are growing all across the nation. To have a single body uniting Islamic school leaders, Islamic schools teachers, Islamic school administrators, administrative assistants, board members, those that govern the schools, is such an important piece to establish a trajectory of growth. And I think that although, like you said, there are small pockets of networking happening, rightfully so, with schools that are close to one another, but just the ability now, especially now with all of what we have in terms of our technology, and as well as our accessibility and experience with technology in these past couple of years, we can do a lot more than what we currently have, just kind of having a couple of schools reach out to one another. So really the higher end of this vision was truly to make it national and be able to tap into so much more.
Brother Asad, I believe you said that this is a national association, but when I was taking a look at the members and the experts, most of them are based in Ontario. What is your plan to reach out to other provinces then?
That's a great question. When we started the association, it was very recent. We started kind of discussing, having the dialogue around the idea, and one thing we noticed was that Canada is the only country that has Islamic schools, as private schools, that doesn't have an association. And so the way we started was essentially in June of 2022. A few months ago, we opened up an inaugural presentation, a webinar about the association and it hitting off the ground. And the way we invited principals and teachers and educators from all over the country was we created a database of Islamic schools that are in every province in the country, and we invited each school leader as well as their teachers through email. And we got a really good attendance in that inaugural, and I think part of that speaks to the need of an association like this. So although you see our network is primarily based from Ontario, we are reaching out to all parts of the country, and it's been successful in our step one inaugural event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You said resources before. You mentioned a little bit about it. Can you tell me more about those? What are some of these issues or topics that ISAC is working on unpacking?
Great question, and I think one of the things that we noticed, myself, I've been a school principal in Islamic schools for the past 11 years, in education for the past 20, and people on the network of the ISAC have similar backgrounds. And one thing we noticed in our time as practitioners was the lack of not just networking, but resources and in specific areas that we kind of struggled in. So one example is students with learning disabilities or physical disabilities, and how do Islamic schools accommodate that? How do they attend to that? And typically what happens is we acknowledge the fact that, look, we're not resourced enough to do intake of new students with these type of disabilities, which does a disservice to those families that they strive to be in an Islamic school, but because of a disability, the door is shut for them. So one of the things that we want to tap into is partnerships with organizations that do that kind of work, that get grants and funding for schools and disabilities, specifically private schools in provinces like Ontario that don't have any government funding, right? So that would be an example, and there's many others, but I really think that step one to our organization is doing the research we need to do. Let's really seek to understand what Islamic schools need with regards to resources and best practices, and then follow suit with what we can tap into.
And these resources that you plan to develop, can they only be used by Islamic schools?
No, absolutely not. Resources that are that are used in education in general is what we would be tapping into. We have, Islamic schools. Some of the Islamic schools I've been to, and the educators I've met in these schools have vast amount of experiences that offer professional development to other schools, and that just doesn't start and stop with the Islamic school spectrum, but other schools, other faith-based schools, other public schools. Typically, you'll find when it comes to K-12 education and the adversities and challenges that many articulate are not too far off from each other. Of course, there are contextual variables school to school, but there are certainly big rock topics that any school could benefit from. And so those resources are no different.
Now, we don't have a lot of time left, but could you tell me, how can people join the association then?
So the association, I like to kind of call it's still in its grassroots, still in its infancy, so to speak. It's a few months old, but more and more people, more and more educators, more and more schools are getting wind of it, are reaching out with interest of exactly that question. How do we learn more? How do we join the association? And right now we have a listserv with email addresses of school leaders, of educators, of board members, of researchers. Like I said, from the database. If anyone wants to join that, they simply reach out to us via our website, via our email. We have WhatsApp groups, and we've kind of separated the WhatsApp groups to be more specific. So we have a teachers WhatsApp group, a principals, vice principals, superintendents WhatsApp group. We are also starting other groups as interest comes in. So really, it's about visiting our website, getting that initial feel of what we're all about, showing that interest, and truly,
and then building on that. Exactly. Well, sadly, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Brother Asad, for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Pleasure's all mine. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. That's it from our Toronto studios tonight. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more Canadian Muslim content. Stay safe, and until next time.